Misfits, people ask me all the time about tools that I use in my life and business to maximize my success. I usually start by telling them one of my most powerful tools is my morning habits. And of course, they look at me somewhat confused. I then explain how important it is for me to center myself and how I begin my day and plan for my success. It's critical to consistent high performance. And it doesn't take me long, about 5 or 10 minutes, because I use a great resource called the 5-Minute Journal. The 5-Minute Journal is the simplest, most effective way I've ever found to start your day in the right mindset, doing the right things, and set yourself up for success. And it is exactly what it says, a 5-minute exercise you can do each day. Let me ask you, if you could reach your next level in your life and business by spending just 5 minutes of focused time a day, would you do it? I bet you would. And I know it works because I've experienced the power of it. And you can get your 5-minute journal simply by going to www.misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. Do what I do. Use this amazing resource to give yourself an edge in your performance and your success. Get your 5-minute journal today.
Hello, Misfit Entrepreneurs. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it is our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs with a specific focus on their misfit side, their specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you're new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. Man, it is great to be back. As many of you know, I took a little break to focus on healing and fixing my nerve issue that hit me back in February. And if you don't know this, earlier this year, I was training for my Ironman season, the next World Championships, and was in the best shape that I've been, in quite some time, only to be struck seemingly out of nowhere by a disc issue in my back that severely affected a nerve. I was actually unable to walk for several weeks, but after a lot of hard work and getting help from some awesome doctors, I'm on the mend, getting back to normal. And when you hear what today's guest focuses on, it will make a lot of sense as to why I had to have him on as my first guest in coming back from this injury. So this week's Misfit Entrepreneur is Dr. Tracy Gapin. If you've ever wondered how to truly optimize your health, your performance, longevity as a high-achieving entrepreneur, executive, or even an athlete, Tracy's the doctor that you want to know. He's a board-certified urologist with over 25 years of experience who made a bold pivot from traditional medicine to founding the Gapin Institute, a premier performance health facility helping elite performers achieve more by mastering their biology. Dr. Gapin is a trailblazer in the field of men's health optimization. He combines cutting-edge diagnostics, epigenetics, hormone therapy, wearable tech to deliver really personalized, measurable results. He's also the best-selling author of Male 2.0 and Codes of Longevity, a frequent speaker at top biohacking events like Dave Asprey's Biohacking Conference, and he's been featured Entrepreneur Magazine, NBC, and a lot of other places. Tracy's mission is to really redefine what's possible for men's health, not just to live longer, but to live better, sharper, more fulfilled at really every stage of life. And so after going through my recent experience, I learned how to even further optimize my health and my ways that I do things. And I feel it's important to help you do the same. And Tracy's the guy to do it. So let's jump in. Tracy, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
Absolutely. Glad to be here with you today, Dave.
Well, it's great to have you on. And, you've got an interesting story, right? You didn't set out to do this. You went more the traditional medicine path, and now you've moved to this. So take 5 minutes or so and just tell us, how'd you get to where you're at? Tell us your story.
Sure. Yeah. So I was a board certified urologist for almost 25 years, doing big surgeries, doing robotic surgery. I was treating prostate cancer every day, saving lives every day. And I hit a wall. I was about halfway through my career, and I wake up one day and I'm 30 pounds overweight. I'm fat. I feel like crap. I'm stressed out, and I didn't like who I was. I realized that when I would walk in the hospital every day to operate, I became an asshole, and it's because I didn't feel good, and I was really in the worst health of my life while I am here sacrificing everything to take care of my patients. And so I went to see a doctor. My first time to ever actually be on the other side. seeing a doctor. And it was a real eye-opening experience. The only real answer he had for me was to start taking a statin. Now, I knew I needed help, but I knew I needed a lot more than that. And I had to, at that point, really humbly recognize that as this men's health expert that I was, operating, saving lives every day, I didn't really have the answer for how do I actually lose weight, get in shape, regain my energy, my focus, and turn things around beyond pharmaceuticals, beyond surgeries, et cetera. And so I went back to school. I started studying functional medicine, regenerative medicine, hormones, peptides, longevity. And when I took these principles and applied them, I was able to actually turn my health around. It was actually fairly straightforward with integrating all of these modalities that were not really being used in the traditional healthcare world. And so I started offering the same approach with my patients in my urology practice, and they started getting great results as well. And I'll tell you, Dave, I found my passion again for medicine. I was frustrated, disillusioned, burned out, ready to honestly consider leaving medicine if I had a way to, support my family. I was very disillusioned, and I suddenly found my passion, purpose, and it got me to love what I was doing again. And so I made the massive, bold decision, and I stepped away from a very lucrative 7-figure urology practice, surgical practice, to start over. I went from 7 figures to 0, and I launched the Gapin Institute, where at the Gapin Institute, we serve high-performing entrepreneurs, founders, athletes, leaders who want to be performing at that high level in everything they do, whether it's at work, whether it's at play, whether it's at sport, whether it's with their kids at home. And to do that, our traditional healthcare system cannot help you in any way. And so that's what I built. I built an amazing center with an amazing team around me. And in the last 5 years now, we've grown dramatically. And now we're moving on to the next phase, which is teaching other doctors how to do the exact same thing that I've done so that I can have an even bigger impact.
No, that's awesome. And, great story too. And I've got a ton of questions. I don't know if we'll get to them all today. So I want to dive into this. I want to kind of start high level and then kind of go down and then talk about your entrepreneur experience. Yeah. But, I've heard you, say or state that like healthspan equals wealthspan. And so kind of explain what that means, because I think that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the things we're going to go into.
Yeah. So many entrepreneurs, founders, business owners are so busy focused on building their wealth that they don't realize how much their health is impacting that. So you look at guys like Paul Allen, he was worth over $30 billion, the co-founder of Microsoft. He died at age 56. You look at Steve Jobs, who died at a very young age as well. These men had all the money in the world, but they couldn't buy one more day. And so I really emphasize that you need to focus on your most valuable asset, which is your health. It can either be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, depending on how you look at it, depending on what you do about it. And so, when it comes to the marketing side of what we're talking about here, it's most men, especially women, are better than men for sure. Most men are problem unaware that there's any problem. I feel fine. I'm good. My doctor told me I'm air quotes normal. I'll say bullshit. I'm fine. Stress doesn't affect me. It affects the next guy. Stress doesn't bother me. I'm able to overcome that. Bullshit. Men don't realize that we have massive blind spots in our health that are dramatically affecting our cognitive function every day, our focus, our mental acuity, our ability to make sharp, quick decisions that are definitely, without question, affecting your performance on a daily basis, which is affecting your impact and your income. And so I do believe that your health directly impacts everything else in your life.
So with that as a backdrop, then obviously, working with high-performing entrepreneurs, executives, athletes, all of that, like what are some of the most common health mistakes or blind spots that you see among them?
Yeah. So there are a lot of problems. Number one, guys think I'm fine. My doctor told me I'm normal, and they stick their head in the sand and don't do any testing, don't even evaluate things because they think that they're fine. And so I always emphasize first, you got to test, don't guess. And so most guys don't do any of the testing. They don't do the analysis to look at things like hormones. One of the biggest problems I see is men have low testosterone, low thyroid, low DHEA, low vitamin D, low nitric oxide, low growth hormone. We have 50 hormones that we look at, and a lot of guys are told by their primary care doctor, your testosterone looks fine, you're normal. Well, no, there's normal, which is this reference interval, which is the average, which is plummeting every year, versus optimize where you want to be. And all these hormones are affecting your focus, your mental acuity, your energy, your drive, your ability to build muscle, burn fat, perform in athletics, have great sex, and ultimately longevity as well. And so it's hormones, blood sugar regulation. People think you're either just diabetic or you're not. Well, it's not that straightforward. Sometimes stress from psychological stuff going on with finances or marital issues or kids or life are affecting your blood sugar, not just nutrition. Sometimes poor sleep. One of the most common things I see with high performers is they have crappy sleep. These are stressors to our system, which are affecting blood sugar. And listen, there's no way you're going to be able to build muscle and burn fat like you want to and perform like you want to if your blood sugar is not regulated. So it's hormones, it's blood sugar, it's systemic inflammation, again, being driven from that chronic stress that we're exposed to in our daily life.
So people hear this and it's like, okay, it's like this, it's this, it's like all these things that have to be pulled together to maximize performance, right? And then there's even things like you talk about like epigenetics and like even, wearables and all that. It can seem overwhelming, right? Because I've been down this road, and like all the different things, right? So like break it down, like what does I won't say perfect because I don't know if there is a perfect one, but what's like a great health routine look like, especially for like an entrepreneur?
Sure. So first of all, I would simplify it by just simply get tested. And there's 5 general categories of tests that I recommend you focus on having a longevity medicine doctor do. Most primary care doctors don't have a clue, honestly, unfortunately. It's hormones, it's cardiovascular health, it's blood sugar, it's inflammation, and it's nutrients. Testing around those 5 things from blood testing first is the best way to get started. All the other stuff that can be overwhelming, I would set aside until you do those tests first to get a foundational, fundamental, what are my blind spots? What do I need to fix? I always like to go back to, the EOS model of your 3 rocks for the quarter. I focus on your core 3, which are your 3 things to focus on this quarter. And that's it right now, because otherwise it gets overwhelming. But when it comes to lifestyle, there's the nutrition, sleep, fitness, stress, and toxins, environmental exposure kind of categories. And the danger here is to should all over you. Okay. Tell you what you should be doing, right? Everyone's different. So we can talk about like basic, if you want me to go through some basic fundamentals of those 5 categories, I can. But what I'll tell you is that I like to say one size fails all, meaning what Dave should be eating is very different than what Dr. Tracy should be eating and different than what Jeff should be eating based on your genetics, based on your microbiome testing, your gut testing, based on your other blood tests that we do to understand what's right for your body. How do we improve your sleep? You respond to different supplements than I'm going to respond to. You have different needs based on testing. We may find that Dave's issue is deep sleep, whereas Dr. Tracy's issue is REM sleep. Very different protocols, recommendations for how to fix that. So I'm always hesitant to give blanket recommendations to everybody. There are 5 things you should do before bed for everybody. Meditate, read, journal, sauna, and sex are the only 5 things that you should do in those last 2 hours before bed. Focus on that. It's going to help set you up for success. But when it comes to like supplementation, stuff like that, it just depends. When it comes to fitness, it depends on your genetics, on your injury status, your age, what your goals are. Your goals are obviously very different than a guy like me. And so there's so much nuance to it that you go to Twitter and Reddit and Instagram, you got these influencers having the perfect body, wearing the sexy outfits, telling you what to do. And it's just all nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's like, how do you get to like for it is an individual thing. In fact, one of the things that the last year plus really been on the kick of is like, everything happens at a cellular level, right? So Casey Means wrote her book on good energy and all of that. And I think that, I read that and that kind of kicked it off for me. But the, you have to think about like what you feed your body, like what you put in feeds your cells and make your cells operate optimally. And it is different for people in different everybody's body's different. And so like some of this testing you're talking about, like I've done some of that to get a better feel for like how I should manage things. And like you mentioned things like, like sugar, like as an athlete at the level as that I'm at, I actually should in some ways take in more sugar than a standard person should, right? When I'm training and doing things to help with like, keeping my glucose steady and all of that so that I can perform at a good level. And so, yes, it is drastically different. I think per each individual. If somebody like hears this and is like, okay, fine, but like, how hard is it to get these tests? Like, is it cost an arm and a leg? I mean, if you read I read Tony Robbins' book on lifespan or whatever it was, Life Force, and he's got his clinics and everything. It's like $25,000 to get the whole workup done, right? And stuff like, what's the reality of being able to do this? How easy is it for somebody to do? What should they be thinking about from a cost standpoint? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there are, and you bring up a great point. You can spend a few $100s to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on your health. And I would emphasize that you need to invest in your health, first of all. There's nothing more important to you than your health. That being said, of course, we have budgets. Of course, everyone can't go to Panama and get full body stem cell therapy. It's just not within their budget. I get that. That's why I always like to start simple. Start with basic blood work with those 5 categories I mentioned earlier. Start with that. And what that will show you is what are your blind spots? What are the areas that need attention? What areas are you doing great in? If you're doing great in an area, you don't need to be throwing a bunch of supplements and a bunch of extra work in that area. Focus on the low-hanging fruit. And what I find typically is it's hormones, it's inflammation, it's gut health, it's blood sugar, it's sleep, stress. Those are the basic fundamental things that when we correct those, a lot of the other issues tend to take care of themselves. But it is an investment, but you don't need to be spending tens of thousands of dollars to get those results.
But a lot of those things you mentioned, like hormones and gut health and things like that, standard blood testing, if you just go do an annual physical, doesn't necessarily test for all those things, right?
You're
so
right.
Is it something that they need to ask their doctor for, or is there a specific, through you, obviously, you can go through and get that testing, but like how should they go about getting to those specific things so they actually can, make a difference for themselves?
At the Gapin Institute, that's what we do. But I'll tell you, the reason why I've done this, the reason why I jumped off that figurative cliff and left traditional medicine to launch the Gapin Institute is this exact problem that you point out. You go to your doctor and they're going to order the wrong tests with the wrong reference ranges or optimal ranges. So let me give you an example. For men, for testosterone, you go to your primary care doctor. You say, I want to check my testosterone. Okay, they're going to order total testosterone, for example. Well, total testosterone actually is fairly worthless. It's an irrelevant test because about 98% of your testosterone is actually bound to proteins in the bloodstream, like sex hormone binding globulin, albumin, and some other proteins. When testosterone is bound to a protein like that, it cannot get into a cell. You mentioned everything happens in the cell. It cannot get into the cell. It cannot bind to the androgen receptor in the cell. It can't get to the nucleus of the cell. It can't affect DNA transcription and affect protein synthesis. It can't do any of that because it can't get into the cell. So the only testosterone you care about is free testosterone. And so the first problem is doctors are checking the wrong tests or looking at total, which doesn't matter. But we're not educated on this in our traditional healthcare medical education system. We're not taught this stuff. So first is they're looking at the wrong marker, but then they're looking at the wrong reference interval as well. Because if you look at your lab slip, and let's say the doctor did do free testosterone, which is great that they actually were smart enough to do that. When you look at a LabCorp Quest lab slip, for example, you'll see on the right side of the page is that reference interval. And we're taught as doctors and the public as well. If you're in that range, that means you're normal, you're fine, you're good. But that's actually not true because what has happened, we have 3 longitudinal studies, 3 massive studies, 1 in the US and 2 in Europe, that all showed the same thing. And that is that hormone levels are plummeting worldwide. Toxins in our environment are the most likely culprit here, but hormones are plummeting to the tune of free testosterone is almost 50% lower than it was 20 years ago.
Do we know why? Do we know why this is happening? Is it because of our food and everything, or
it's toxins in our food, toxins in our drinking water, estrogenic chemicals everywhere you turn, plastics, you name it, in our personal care products. all over the place. And I've done YouTube videos about this topic in detail, but definitely studies have supported endocrine disruption from toxic chemicals without question. So a 50-year-old man today has a free testosterone that's about half of what it was 20, 30 years ago. Literally, it's crazy, half. And so how that's relevant is the LabCorp or Quest lab reference intervals are based on the average of the population, which again is half what it was 20 years ago. So we're being told we're, quote, normal when we're just simply not. And so that's the second problem is our doctors are looking at the wrong markers, they're looking at the wrong intervals, and they're making false conclusions. And so, you know, a recent NIH study showed that most doctors here in the US are 17 years behind the science. And that's the big problem with our medical system is that most doctors just don't understand this stuff yet. And this is why longevity medicine, precision medicine is starting to gain attention because the public waking up and realizing that our healthcare system is just flat out broken.
Yeah, and you know, interesting too. You mentioned it earlier, and it's I don't think a lot of people know this. Most medical doctors, I think it's maybe 1 hour or 2 hours of nutrition training, if that.
That's about 1 to 2 hours more than I got, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. In medical school, we don't get taught anything at all. And I spent the last 10 years of my urology practice going back to school, getting certified in epigenetics, which is the science of lifestyle and environment and behaviors, how it affects our genetic expression, studying functional medicine and all this stuff that they don't teach you in medical school, but it's so important. And now the public is finally waking up and realizing that we need to be more proactive and more intentional and not just wait for problems to occur when it's typically too late.
Well, and technology, I think, has helped a lot with that too, with our capabilities now and everything. In fact, I want to dig in more on that, on a few things around this, and talk a little bit about what you've written about in your books and stuff too. But we'll take just a quick 1 minute break. We'll be right back, and we'll dig into that.
Misfit Entrepreneurs, I want to tell you about an amazing resource that will have tremendous impact on your business and your revenue. I have used this solution in multiple businesses and it has made an incredible difference. Let me start by asking you something. Do you know how much it costs your business when just one salesperson doesn't step up to deliver? Do you really know? The cost can easily exceed 6 figures for just one bad hire, not just from the time, effort, and resources in hiring them, but from the lost business and downtime as well, as you have to go find a new salesperson and everything surrounding that. And the last thing any growing business can afford is to have a failed hire, especially in sales, the revenue driver for the company. But what if there was a way to know someone checked all the boxes of a great sales hunter and closer before you ever hired them? That's the solution that I found from a company called Sales Drive. They have created a solution called Drive Test. It's a powerful hiring tool that separates high-performance salespeople from pretenders by measuring the most critical personality trait needed for success in sales: drive. Drive is composed of 3 non-teachable traits shared by all top producers: the need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism. And knowing who has drive before the interview dramatically increases your chances of selecting salespeople who will produce for you while avoiding those costly bad hires. I've used the solution and it works. In fact, it works so well, I've referred them to every company that I work with. And they've created a very special offer so that you can try them for free as well. You can get a free drive test assessment today at www.misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive, all one word. Start using the drive test in your hiring and never hire a bad salesperson again.
All right, so Tracy, to kind of just round out the last set of topics we're talking about, because it's very individual, right, with each person to optimize their health, right? Even with that said, if somebody's watching this going, okay, I get it, I've got to do these things to optimize, but just give me something that I could be doing that works for most people, right? Like I could start doing today, like a lifestyle change or something that will improve my performance or help my health span. Like, what's 1 or 2 things that they should do?
The single most important thing to focus on for everybody and anyone is sleep. Sleep is when your body repairs, it recovers, it rebuilds. When you work out, when you train in the gym, you're not building muscle. We know we're actually tearing down muscle. We're injuring muscle so that it rebuilds bigger, faster, and better. Well, that repair happens when you're sleeping. And so when you're sleeping is when all the magic happens. And so I'd focus on the 5 things I mentioned earlier for sleep. Most guys, it's self-sabotage. We're so focused on building our business and making that next landing page and fixing that Google sheet. It's like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. We're still working. We're still grinding away. And you need to 100% focus on getting good quality sleep. And the only way you do that is to be intentional about it. And so count backwards. If you have to wake up at 6, that means you have to be asleep by 10:30. That means you got to be in bed by 10. And you need to be tracking. So you need to be using, I use Aura, but there are a lot of other great devices out there to track the sleep quality, meaning 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep. If you're not getting that, ask yourself why. A big trigger for sleep problems also is alcohol. Alcohol crushes sleep quality. It may make you sedated, fall asleep. It's horrible quality sleep. So that's a big one for you. I would say would be sleep. The other thing is daily habits cannot be sustained by willpower alone. So we're talking about whether it's eating a certain way, whether it's focusing on doing meditation, whether it's a fitness program, habits in general, you cannot sustain on willpower alone. It has to be based on discipline. And so I love the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. It's a fantastic book everyone should read. Atomic Habits by James Clear is great as well. I personally prefer Tiny Habits. What it talks about is ABC. What's the anchor? What's the behavior that are going to attach to that anchor? So every day, the example he gives in the book that I love is every time he pees, he does 2 push-ups. Pee, 2 push-ups. Pee, 2 push-ups. Now, he may decide that day he's going to do 100 push-ups. Awesome. But he's always going to do at least 2. What that creates is consistent, disciplined, daily, tiny habits that can blossom. You're creating the accountability to yourself. Dave, one of the biggest things is not that you should be crushing it every day, is that you should just be freaking consistent and doing something every single day, no matter how little it is. And then you can grow from there as the time allows. That's the biggest problem that I see with guys is lack of consistency.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because one of the things I've talked about on this show for years that, after I look for patterns, right? When interviewing great guests like yourself over all these years, right? Like, what are the patterns? What are the things that you can learn, right? And several years ago, I really boiled it down to 3 things: discipline, consistency, and persistence. The DCP formula, I call it, right? And so what's discipline? Discipline's doing the things you need to do even when you don't want to do them. And even if you're, and you can be disciplined for one day, but it doesn't do any good if you don't consistently do it. So you have to be consistent in your discipline. And even if you're disciplined and you're consistent, you're going to hit what seems like insurmountable roadblocks, things that just, big things that stand in your way. And if you're not willing to persist for them, that's where you stag, you get stagnant, you plateau out.
That's right.
And so, it's so funny to hear you say that, because it's the same with your health and everything too,
Yeah.
And that's a good segue into, you've written 2 books, Male 2.0, Codes of Longevity. Like, and you probably get this question a lot, and it's a hard one to answer even when people ask me about my books, but, some of the biggest takeaways, like what from those books, you think entrepreneurs should know that we maybe haven't covered yet?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Male 2.0 was my first book, and it was focused on this concept of Male 1.0, which is how men's health is failing. Testosterone levels are plummeting, obesity is rising. Men, we're dying younger. So what we're doing isn't working. And men in general are worse than women in terms of being proactive, in terms of taking charge. And we tend to wait until there's a problem, wait till it's too late. So Male 2.0 is being proactive instead of waiting until there's a problem to get the initial testing done, the diagnostics to find your blind spots. It's about being personalized, using rather than the one size fails all approach that most people, you hear the influencers telling you what to eat on Instagram. It's what's right for your genetics, what's right for your body, your testing. So it's personalized and it's precision-based, where we use data. We use wearable tech tracking data to measure outcomes. And, as entrepreneurs, as founders, as business owners, we have KPIs, or key performance indicators, for our business. We have metrics that we measure every day to see if we're actually succeeding. Why don't we do the same with our health? And so it's establishing those metrics by using wearables, whether it's blood sugar tracking, whether it's tracking stress. Yes, you can measure stress, whether it's tracking your nutrient intake, whether it's tracking sleep, so that we can see that we're actually making progress. And so it's taking a very different, fresh approach than what men have done up until now, because what we're doing clearly isn't working.
Now, good points all around, and it really, it just summarizes kind of where we've come so far in this discussion. I want to shift gears, talk a little bit about your entrepreneur experience and some of the things that you've learned along the way, right? Sure. It's something caught my eye, and I find there's a lot of parallels here. You've worked with, elite athletes, right? And so, like, what parallels do you see between optimizing for sport and optimizing for business success?
Love that. So yeah, worked with several NFL players, worked with Olympians, worked with a lot of retired athletes as well. And I think that the key thing that I find with athletes is they are very systematic in what they do. They have processes, they have routines, they have consistency. And as I've built Gapin Institute and built an amazing team around me, we have been obsessed with SOPs, systems, processes. How do we create a scalable model? Because now I'm working on our program is called Peak Launch. Peak Launch MD is for now teaching and training medical doctors out there who want to do the same thing I've done, follow my path. How do you do what I've done? The way to do that is be very systematic about it. And when I work with athletes, they're very regimented and structured, and they keep metrics and they measure and they track outcomes, and they're systematic. And so I follow that same model in the business as well. And I think that's what's really helped us get great results with our clients, help them organize and systematize things and scale the business as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, because I employ it in a lot of the businesses that I either consult with or if I take over like a CEO position, and EOS. Right. So EOS is Entrepreneur Operating System. And I take it you've used that, or you do use that.
We do.
And EOS is a great framework for how to create consistency in running a business, right? Your meetings are the same structure, your vernacular is the same structure, all that, on down to your teams and all of that. And that's, those things are really great. They're a great base to build off of. Right. They're going to get you 70, 80% of the way there because they are in some ways cookie cutter. You got to kind of make them your own. But there are frameworks. I think that's the thing I want to share. There are frameworks out there. You don't have to just reinvent the wheel with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think, your advice there is, I think, spot on for any entrepreneur. If they haven't implemented that type of consistent framework where everybody's kind of following the same process and playbook, they'll find it makes a huge difference when they implement it into their company. So, good point on that. If, you've learned a lot of lessons on your journey, and if you're talking to the next generation of entrepreneurs, like I guess if you could only teach one principle to them, right? On how to build a great business, what would that be for you?
Yeah. I think it's really important to focus on what is your passion, what is as they talk about in a strategic coach, Dan Sullivan's amazing program, what's your unique ability, and stay in that lane. So, for example, I love to teach. I love to simplify. I love to teach. I love to build systems to help create efficient, sustainable results. And that is embodied in everything I do in the business. And that's the outcome that we provide as well. And so I think that staying in your unique ability and focusing on your big why and your passion, I think has been really a big driver in our business, because there's so many shiny objects out there, things you can do. Mm-hmm. You could do a lot of different things, and those things may make some money. But I think to make it sustainable and to make it a solid business that will grow and scale, it has to be built on something bigger than that, a higher, bigger purpose.
Well, talk about a fast way to burn out or health issues is trying to be everything you're not and get out of your zone of genius and do everything, right? So that's harder said than done, right? When you're just starting out and everything, you've got to do everything. But as soon as you can, especially with the technologies and things that we have today at our fingertips, you can get a lot of leverage and make your life a lot easier. Don't, look for ways to find that leverage and duplicate and make it easier for yourself, because the tools are out there exist to do it. And obviously, as you bring on team members, you can do that. You're in all this. I think you're hitting at a great time. I think you're at the beginning of a really big wave that's just going to continue on, right? AI is making a huge difference. I pretty much can guarantee, I bet you're using that extensively in your business to help with your analysis and help with all that you're doing with your clients. Where do you see the future of like personalized health going? Like, what breakthroughs are on the horizon that maybe excite you the most and people should know about?
Yeah, so we're building a massive model around AI-driven automated protocols, and I think that's going to really make the entire process much more efficient and easier for our clients to understand, what do I do with all this information? Because one thing that's happening is, as people are getting exposed to more of this health stuff, it starts to become noise. Becomes, you mentioned earlier, it becomes overwhelming. There's data coming in from blood work and functional tests and wearable technology and lifestyle recommendation, and it becomes overwhelming. So AI is great for assimilating it and simplifying it and creating clear protocols. And I think that's going to only continue to refine what we do. All that being said, I think that what will never, ever be replaced is the human element to it. So what I mean by that is, we have 5 core values at Gapin Institute, and one of them is human connection. And I don't think that's going to ever go away. As great as AI may become, as great as blockchain may become, there's still a need for the human element, the human connection. And when I or my team can interact with a client face to face, eye to eye, and feel them and understand how to translate that into slight tweaks in what we do and how we can sometimes connect just by listening. AI can't listen to you. It can hear you. It can't listen. And so I think that's what's never going to change, is the human connection.
No, I agree. And I think we're hardwired as human beings to crave that connection, right?
Yeah, we need it. You're right.
It's like a pendulum. I think we've swung very, very much in one direction, to where, like, so much is on social media and you're in your phone and it's like an extension of you. And then you have AI and all this other stuff. I think it's almost like, you've heard of app fatigue, right? Where you have, like, I guarantee you, like, probably 80% of the apps that you have on your phone, you don't use very often, if at all, right? But you've got them on there. Like, and so it's like, oh, I don't need another app, right? Well, I think at some point the pendulum will swing back to where, we just crave that human connection. And we may, like, if the progress that is predicted for AI into AGI, ASI, and all that stuff really happens, I think, like, there almost is, like, going to be almost a whole nother bigger vertical in industry around just helping humans connect, like, as humans in the future, right? Because, the further we go, the more that gets lost. I was just talking with, somebody about this the other day. I mean, if you just think about, like, how you did things before, like, even the smartphone compared to now. And that was, 15 years ago or so. It's just an amazing difference in the amount of, the less of the connection human wise that we have. And I think we'll swing back. So, good point on that. My last question for you before I get to, really get to your Misfit Three, and it involves a lot of this, right? So, like, we have entrepreneurs, all walks of life, and we've got women too, right? I know you specialize in men and everything else, but if you had to, you've built one 7-figure business, you left it, and you started this one, built that one up. Like, if you had to start over today, like, what would you do differently? What are some of the lessons that you've learned that you would, really, think would make things go even better for you the next time around?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. And actually, I am starting over again with Peak Launch MD, my new program I just launched, actually. So perfect segue into that. And I look back on how, when I started, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I think that a great question. Thank you. I think it starts with, first of all, you tend to get so lost in the how, right? Like, what I look back on when I struggled in the beginning was the how held me back. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And so I became paralyzed by, I can't move forward till I know how to do this. Now I'm freaking moving fast. Like, I I made the Google Doc and I started sharing it the next day. And we start Monday, and like we're like, there's no time to slow down anymore now, because I've learned to quit freaking focusing on the how and find the who can help me do it faster. And that's made all the difference in the world. So again, this goes back to what's your unique ability, stay in your lane, hire the who's who can help you do it for you so that you can move faster. So that helps you be much more efficient. So to me, that's a big part of it. The second is, it took me way too long in the beginning to focus on the transformation. I was so focused on the deliverables and what's included and the nuts and bolts and the let's include this and that and the packages and the pricing and the position. All that stuff, it's irrelevant to who are you serving and what are you helping them achieve? What's the goal? What's the transformation? And now, as I create new messaging around this new offer, it's so much easier when you come from that angle. It's simply, who are you serving and how are you going to help them? And that makes the messaging and the copy so much clearer, because you're just solving a problem. That's what business is all about, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's been really, for me, the game changer that's helped me move a lot faster than I did in my first iteration.
No, that's great. That's a great way to end it before we get to your Misfit 3. And we're going to do that. We're going to take one more 1-minute break. We'll be right back with Tracy's Misfit 3.
Before we get into today's Misfit 3, I want to take a minute to talk to you about a free resource available to you from the Misfit Entrepreneur, the Misfit Minute. The Misfit Minute is the free weekly resource packed with useful tips, tricks, and information from the world of Misfit entrepreneurs. It not only includes further resources on the week's Misfit Entrepreneur guest, but additional links, articles, and resources to help you be more successful. It's delivered every Friday to your inbox. To sign up, all you have to do is go to the homepage at www.misfitentrepreneur.com and you will see the Misfit Minute sign-up page. Don't miss out on this great resource and all it has to help you. Sign up today and look for it this Friday.
Okay, it's time for Tracy's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that he wants you to take that you can put in your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you were going to leave this earth tomorrow and you could only leave behind your 3 best pieces of wisdom to the generations that come after you to help them live their best life, what would those 3 things be? So, Tracy, what are your Misfit 3?
Sure. So the first one goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is from the health perspective. There is nothing more important than your health. Without your health, you have nothing, and it could be your greatest asset, your worst liability. And so I would simply recommend everyone out there, just get tested. Get the testing done on the 5 categories I talked about. Find your blind spots, address them earlier while you can still fix them, because at some point it will be too late. So that's really the first one. The second one is to focus on what is your why. We talked earlier about your passion, about your unique ability, and so often we chase shiny objects. We chase ways of making an extra buck. And I did that for many years in my urology practice. I was making great money as a surgeon. I was not happy. I was not fulfilled. And it showed up in how I presented myself every day and who I was. I was a jerk. I didn't like who I was. And so follow your heart, follow your passion, and build a business around that. And you'd be amazed at how that's going to attract your ideal target audience. That's going to attract people around you who are going to follow in your passion and your mission. So that's number 2. And then the third, I have a lot of different options here on where I can go, but I think it's going to be, when you're building your business, and I'm going to talk business-wise more than health-wise, because I've talked health so far most of the time here. When it comes to your business, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to focus on your core values and your culture. So the way I've built my business is around our 5 core values and our culture, and every hire we make has to fulfill those core values and that culture. And if they don't fit in, they're not getting hired. You can train content, you cannot train character. And so I'd emphasize, as you're building your team, as you're building your business, even who you keep as acquaintances, as friends, etc., do they follow your core values and do they fit the culture of who you are as a person? When you do that, everything else becomes easy.
Tracy, I love that. The last one is so important for business and life. You mentioned do they align with your core values? An exercise that everybody needs to do, and a lot of people don't do, is just to sit down and figure out what their core values are.
That's right.
So I hopefully that's kind of a wake up call, because once you do that, a lot of things fall in line. And the other thing too is that bettering your health does help you to become more effective in business. So it all kind of comes together. So great stuff. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Thanks so much. So our website is gapininstitute.com. That's GAPIN institute.com. And I always like to give away a gift at the end of every show. So if you go to gapininstitute.com/launch, that's LAUNCH, I have a complimentary digital copy of my best-selling book, Mel 2.0. I have my ultimate peptide guide. I have my high performance health handbook, a bunch of other gifts for your listeners.
Oh, excellent. We'll link to all those in the show notes, the best show notes in the business, for reasons I'll talk about more in a second. But first, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneurs, your first episode with us, welcome. It's such an honor to have you with us. And I hope you become a regular listener and subscriber. And for all of you that are with us week in and week out, I cannot thank you enough for your support of the show. You are what makes this go in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And then go out and check out the show notes for this episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself. I'm one of the few people that still sits down with every one of these episodes as part of my personal growth routine. I go back through them each and every week, and I look for the best insights, pieces of wisdom, tips, things like that, and I share those with you. So go out and check those out. And then go out and give this episode a rating and review. Like and comment on it. Help share Tracy's message, because we all know, and I say this in every episode, one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that Tracy shared today was that missing link you were looking for to improve your life or get to your next level. So share this with others. And again, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all your wisdom and insight today.
Absolutely.